Well, today the topic is remember to remember. And we're going to start off with the lesson of the sunscreen. And I have drawers full of this stuff. I mean, drawers. My wife recently bought me this one, and I have so many that they're in my car, they're everywhere. And she can get a tan in one day. I can get a sunburn in 1 minute. And I even bought a special tube of sunblock from a person in my networking group that is supposed to be super duper stuff. And I thought I would give it a try to help me from getting too much sun on the Pikes Peak Marathon. And if you ever read these things, it says something like, apply liberally to exposed skin 15 minutes before exposure. Reapply after 2 hours, sooner during times of vigorous activity. And so I found out one lasted 8 hours. So strangely enough, there's an age-old lesson in every bottle of sunscreen. Apply and reapply. And real quickly, Deuteronomy 6 through 9 from the Voice says, Moses, listen, Israel, the Eternal is our true God, He alone. You should love Him, your true God, with all your heart and soul, with every ounce of your strength. Make the things I'm commanding you today part of who you are. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you're sitting together in your home and when you're walking together down the road. Make them the last thing you talk about before you go to bed and the first thing you talk about in the morning. Do whatever it takes to remember them. Tie a reminder on your hand and bind a reminder onto your forehead where you'll see it all the time, such as on the doorpost where you cross the threshold or on the city gate. What it's saying here is to constantly remind yourself of what's important. Constantly remind yourself why you're important all day long, all night long. Remember to remember, apply and reapply. You just keep rubbing in that lesson, keep lathering it back on, all the good stuff you've ever done. Those are the things you think about all day, all night, the good things that God's done for you all day, all night, at home, when you're in a conversation. That's how we keep ourselves at the point we can really believe to see the miracles that we desire. See, that's the lesson of the sunscreen. The next lesson is what has been seen cannot be unseen. And you've seen some of the cartoons on that cats with the big eyes or whatever. I was looking online and they said, once you see this, you can't unsee it. It's a picture of Colonel Sanders' head. And they have his little bow tie and it goes down like this. Well, if you look at it, it's like, it looks like a little body with a big head. And when you see it sometime, you'll never be able to unsee that again. And so, see, what has been seen cannot be unseen is a phrase usually taken in the negative. For example, it's like that image that was etched into your memory that one time you walked in on your parents. That's something that just can't be unseen, folks. 911, please. My eyes are burning. You see, let's flip this example and to the positive. And I like to think of each of our lives as something kind of special. And we can each make an imprint of love, an indelible heart watermark on the people who allow us in. And while I was on the top of Pikes Peak doing some last-minute altitude training 2 days before the marathon, a woman caught my eye. And I literally did a neck-twisting double take, cartoonish. And like most tourists on the mountain, this lady and her man were taking pictures of each other. And then it included the expansive view off the top of Pikes Peak from 14,115 feet. And what really caught my eye was her severely deformed face and head. And it was almost like a Picasso painting that came to life. And I was ashamed at myself at that moment for being so shallow. And I watched how people seemed to glance at her, and then they would turn their head and walk by as quickly as they could. And I saw many people do this. And amazingly, this woman, she kept smiling and acted as if she didn't notice their double take stares. And I thought instead of avoiding this unique couple like so many others, that I would go up and talk to them and see if they wanted a few pictures with their camera of them together. And they were elated that I asked. And so after a delightful chat, I took their camera and took some pictures, and it turned out this woman had a successful career. She had a great set of friends. She had a loving husband. And I realized they were a beautiful couple. And what my eyes saw and what my heart saw was not the same thing. What God sees about us is so much different, so much higher, so much greater than we think of ourselves. And if we can somehow just get that God thought about ourselves into our hearts consistently, our life will change. Now, I'm not sure if I made an impact on them, but they sure made an impact on me, this couple. She had love, friends, a career, and a man who saw her true beauty. And apparently she spent more time thinking of who she really was and what she really had than she did analyzing the errant stares of strangers. And the way you look, we care greatly about that. Sometimes I actually comb my hair before I go out. Usually after getting yelled at by my wife. You see, talking to them, I saw what they saw about themselves. See, there are things in life that can be seen, and there are things in life that can't be unseen. In Hebrews 6:10, from the CEV, says, God is always fair. He will remember how you helped his people in the past and how you are still helping them. You belong to God. He won't forget the love you have shown to his people. To God, you are unforgettable. Like many of the millennials, my daughter has a tattoo or two or more. And she works as a lifeguard, so they're out there for all to see. And each one means something to her. And each one tells a story. And a few of them were to honor some of her friends who never made it back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And on one of her shifts, a person came up to her and told her that God hates tattoos. And without missing a beat, my daughter said, if that were true, why does God have us tattooed on the palm of his hands? Isaiah 49:16 from the Amplified says, behold, I have indelibly imprinted, tattooed a picture of you on the palm of each of my hands. That's what it says. That's how God thinks of us. Like it or not. He loves us so much, and he wants to see your face so much, it's like he has you tattooed on the palms of his hands. See, God sees, etches, and tattoos into his eternal remembrance every single good thing that you and I do. It's tattooed forever. And to God, you are unforgettably amazing. To me, you're each and all breathtaking. Like the beautiful couple I met on Pikes Peak. As we train ourselves to think of ourselves in a more godly fashion, as we rehearse those same positive self-images that God sees, super selfies, if you will, how much different would our life be if all you thought about yourself were thoughts that God thought about you? How much different would it be? Our life would be totally different. Would you ever feel like a failure? No, you couldn't. See, seeing something, it's like seeing something you can't unsee. Your love can never be unseen. You see, what has been seen cannot be unseen. Now we're going into the topic here of remember to remember. And we're going to head into a record that liberally applies and reapplies the concept of self-worth selfies. And you're going to watch how Jesus explains the potential power of remembering your accomplishments. It's not egotistical, folks. It's highly necessary to remember what you've done. And watch how he lovingly reminds, redirects, and resurrects the hard impressions of his most faithful followers as he shows them what they could have done had they only remembered the lessons they had just recently done themselves. So trying to keep up. In Mark 9, life had been moving so fast that these great men and women, these disciples and apostles and followers of Jesus, they were forgetting to remember their recent memories. It was just too much too fast. Like a new job, a very hard new job. And they were just trying to keep up. And this failure to mentally rehearse and reapply life's lessons when the pressure was on really stunted their spiritual growth. And it's like Gail Sheehy said, if we don't change, we don't grow. If we don't grow, we aren't really living. I mean, if you had a plant that never grew, you planted a seed, it pops up, and that was it, a sprout. And it never did anything after that. And it was supposed to be a tree or some kind of tomato plant. You wouldn't keep the thing. You see, we need to keep growing. Keep ourselves growing. Keep thinking. And one of the reasons we don't advance in our careers, our relationships, our spiritual life after a sudden growth spurt is because we go back to doing things exactly like we did before. It's human nature. And we settle back into the comfortable, the predictable, the stationary. It's very hard to change, folks, to really change, to stay changed. People talk about 21 days to change a habit, or 3 months to change a habit, or 7 days. You could look at any number. Somebody has something on the internet, how many days it takes. Every change is different. Every person's different. Every season of life is different. I talked to a spine surgeon the other day, and he said, we're doing a lot more surgeries, just outpatient right through the back of the back. He said, but babies, we usually have to open them up and do it from the front. And he said babies heal up so fast. They want to live, and their bodies are just so attuned to heal so they could live. At what point do we want to stop living? Do we want to stop growing? There's some point in a life where we just change. We don't care what we eat. We don't care what we drink. We don't care what we think anymore. And it all plays into this thing, especially thinking. That's the whole point with this. See, it takes a lot of energy to change. To change, you have to change. You have to really want to change. Winston Churchill said, to improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often. In order to grow in life, we have to use our past victories as a springboard toward future success. This is really the point of this teaching. Remember to remember. Apply and reapply. Mentally tattoo each and every success into each and every heartbeat. Bum, 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 bum. It's always positive about yourself. You see, keep reapplying the lessons, keep learning it, keep putting it on, and eventually you'll grow. Eventually it will take. Like that tree that didn't grow for so many years and all of a sudden, boom, it took off. I was reading up on the drought, and it was like 7 years in Texas. And one guy said that he got one of these, it's a deal where you can water the roots. It has like a long probe, and water comes out, and he said he would do this, a few times a week. And he said his trees lived while his neighbor's trees died. And you do it at the drip line, and he would do it like every foot, and he'd do this every few days and water in those same holes, and it saved his trees, because you can't replace them. They'll never be big like that, in our lifetime. So, we just keep reapplying it, keep learning it, keep putting it in. When I was thinking about wearing our success, wearing our successes. And when I finally completed the Pikes Peak Marathon this year by slowly sprinting across the finish line, I know it's an oxymoron, in Manitou Springs, a very small, white-haired race volunteer gently and honorably placed a heavy, shiny finisher medal around my neck. And I felt very proud at that point. And, because I finished. And I felt as though I'd actually accomplished something. And my wife and friends came up and gave me some hugs and some attaboys, and my cell phone blew up with text messages from my kids and other friends and clients, and I smiled, and like the other 800 finishers, I proudly wore my gleaming medal with its colorful blue and purple ribbon, all for a couple hours walking around in Manitou Springs, And here's a note. There's only one day, and one day only, that an adult can wear his or her finisher medal, and that is race day. So I have to take this off. No normal adult would ever go to work the next day wearing the thing, or 3 months later wearing it to college class. The cool thing is, a child would. A child would. And they would think nothing about taking that thing to school multiple times if they accomplished something. And I think, how else will we relive the victory if we don't take the time to openly wear our own successes? You got to talk about it, think about it, imprint it into your heart. The good things that you've done, the great things that you've done. This is the whole lesson today. Remember to remember. Drinking from a fire hose. Those apostles weren't dense. They weren't stupid. They were just advancing so quickly in their spiritual life that they outran the supply lines or supply trains of remembering. They buried the lessons deep within, but instead of keeping them close to the surface where they're accessible. And it was so much learning in so short a time. And right before the record we're about to read in Mark chapter 9, the apostles had just done the miracle feeding of 5,000 people, plus women and children. And that may mean about 10,000 people were fed with just a couple of pieces of bread and a couple of pieces of fish. And that same night that happened, they went out in a boat. And that's when Jesus scared the pee willy out of them as he walked up to them on that storm-tossed water. They watched their buddy Peter hop out of that boat and walk on the water too. What? And they saw him look around like, and realized what the heck he was doing, and he started to go down. Then soggy Jesus with a wet, flapping beard grabbed him and threw his soggy toga rear end back into the boat. And then he hopped in. And the second they got in that boat, the storm stopped and the boat was on the shore. Boom, boom. Just crazy stuff. You know, when you read the record in Mark 6, which you don't need to turn there, but it talks about although they had just witnessed the miracle feeding of Jesus, the miracle of Jesus feeding 5,000 with bread and fish and other signs besides, they didn't understand what it all meant, and their hearts remained hard. That's verse 52. Their hearts remained hard. Now, you think of somebody who's hard-hearted, you think of them as a jerk. He's hard-hearted. He's a jerk. Well, hard-hearted here doesn't mean what we think it means, like a hard nut, like a hard case, a mean person. See, here is our lesson of remembering to remember. If they had just remembered the miracle feeding of 5,000 people, if they had just done that, that had just happened hours before, on their own, they could have believed to save themselves from that storm, and Jesus wouldn't have had to do it. They could not in their mind, all they could see was the storm. All they could see was the storm. All they could feel was the storm. They were scared, and they were fishermen, so it had to be bad. What storm are you facing right now? Do you see yourself in the middle of it? Or can you visualize victory? Can you visualize being on the shoreline? Remember Jonah when he went down? And that's when he started praying? I'm going to get out of this. And he's in the fish's belly, getting wrapped in seaweed. Okay, when I get back on the shore, I'm going to do what you said, God. Then he walks 400 miles to Nineveh when he finally gets vomited out. He could see the victory so clearly, and it happened. Can you? Or do we just see the storm? It could be small. It could be big. Whatever it is. See, a hard heart doesn't mean they were bad people. It just means their hearts had grown callous from rubbing on the same old thoughts. If you're not changing, you're probably hard-hearted. The callus is getting thicker and thicker. And the more we have that callus, the more we're so used to going in that direction. You see, we're thinking the same old way. A callus is designed to be a form of protection. And people allow themselves to become callous to get protected from their own lives. When I was on the final 1.5 miles of the marathon this year, I caught up with a very muscular young man wearing those funny-looking thin shoes with toes. And I asked him how his feet were doing, because mine were killing me. and we had just done over 25 miles on a rocky trail. And he said he works all year to toughen his feet up for this race. And he does a lot of barefoot running to build the calluses. And I said, well, thank God it's 1 more mile to the finish line. Woohoo! And he dropped his head. And he said, I'm not going to be crossing the finish line with you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I was my feet were sort of hurting on the way up. And I got close to the A-frame, and I was 2 minutes to the cutoff time. There's a certain time, if you don't make it, they'll send you back. And then I jammed my toe on a big rock, and it started spurting out blood, and I laid over beside the trail in agonizing pain for 2 minutes. He got disqualified. Then he had to run 11 miles back down, and that's where I caught up with him. And it was just, And he has to run back to his car. His feet were tough enough for street running and for his backyard, but they were no match for a Rocky Mountain trail. Jesus was trying to get his men to cross-train mentally, to never be shocked. In sports, people like to cross-train. They run and they ride a bike and they do different things. It keeps it, you don't just get used to doing one thing over and over. Well, the same thing with this. We have to be mentally agile, or we're never going to be able to believe when the storm's real big, because we're going to be in that storm. Now, how do I deal with this? Even when you're in the middle of it, you have to see victory at the other side of whatever the problem is. It has to be there. See, in order to run or walk with real power, in order to maintain a pace that'll help us finish our personal race in style, in order to be able to handle the changing terrain that we call life, we must keep our believing supple. Supple. And we do that by allowing ourselves to remember our victories. Not just God's victory. What have you done? And you all have done things. You all have blessed me. Everybody who listens to this thing has done something that has affected somebody. Many of you that have helped me, through a difficult time. We all do. Sometimes we don't have to say something. We just have to act a certain way, and it inspires someone else. We have to be able to see the finish line of that particular problem. And so now back to the apostles. And a few weeks before the amazing miracle of feeding 5,000 plus, and that water walking and storm stopping boat ride, and they had helped with another miracle of feeding 4,000 people. I mean, these guys saw some crazy stuff, these apostles. And this all happened just days or weeks before this record we're about to read. Now, I'm saying all this stuff to show you some of the things that they did. Walking on water, the storm, the miracle feeding 5,000, 4,000. They experienced a 3-day healing spree where the towns just kept bringing for 3 days and 3 nights, bringing people for Jesus to heal. And they were a part of that as well. You see, they were busy. They were blessed. You might have heard of the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus takes Peter and John and James up there, and he changes. He looks different. And then actually they heard the voice of God, these guys. And then they come walking back down this mountain, and then they walk a few miles until they get back to this northern part of Galilee, and that's where the story picks up now. So go to Mark chapter 6. I think I said 9 earlier, but it's Mark 6. See, so much learning in so little time. It was like drinking from a fire hose. Jesus had to get these guys to remember, to keep up, and be able to apply and reapply, to tattoo the lessons and victories into the active chambers of their hearts, while at the same time staying supple to changing conditions. I mean, when I went on the race this year, down in Manitou, it's like 90 degrees. And when I got to the top, I could see my breath. It had to be close to 40 or in the 30s. It was such a difference in temperature. So, welcome back. Have you ever come back from a trip only to find that things had gone a bit sideways at work or at home? And Jesus and the boys walk back down this mountain, head a few miles back, and they want to reconnect with all their friends in Galilee. They don't really know what's happening. So verse 14 of Mark 6, when they reached the rest of the disciples, Jesus saw that a large crowd had gathered, and that among them the scribes, the lawyers, were asking questions.
It's 9.
Is that Mark 9? Oh, I'm so sorry. So sorry. Mark 9, verse 14. And and verse 15. Now, right when the crowd saw Jesus, they were overcome with awe and surged forward immediately, nearly running over the disciples. Because Jesus is walking up, there's a big crowd. Now, all of a sudden, the whole crowd just surges toward him. And I was thinking, like, welcome back, because he knows something's going on here. And upon returning to the main body of disciples, Jesus notices a large group of people, and some of them who were confronting his disciples. And he and his 3 others approach. There was the 9 apostles left behind, and him, and the crowd surrounds him. And Jesus to the scribes, verse 16. What are you debating with my disciples? What would you like to know? What are you guys doing here? See, the scribes believed they owned the word. They were the lawyers of the temple, so to speak, and they're lawyers of the law, and they believed that if you didn't believe in God their way, you were wrong. You're wrong. And you've all run into religious people like that. You don't think their way, you're wrong. And that's how these were. And so then while this is happening, while these pious, pointy-headed lawyers, are confronting his guys, a tired, worn-down man jumps into the conversation and changes everything. And watch how easily Jesus shifts gears here. Because he was ready to get into it with these lawyers, these scribes. And then this man, he just took over the conversation. Now you see politicians, they like it when somebody jumps in and starts changing the direction they go at? No, because it's not in their plan. Jesus was supple. He was cross-trained. He could move from here to here in a split second. And that's what he's trying to teach his men. He's ready for anything. And so these religious scholars were about to get schooled. Now, you'll never read about them again in here, but they were still there. So now the father in the crowd, 17. Teacher, I brought my son to you. He is filled with an unclean spirit. He cannot speak. And when the spirit takes control of him, he is thrown to the ground to wail and moan, to foam at the mouth, to grind his teeth, to stiffen up. And I brought him to your followers, but they could do nothing with him. Can you help us? See, the child wouldn't talk, had seizures, tried to kill himself over and over and over again. How would you feel as a parent if your child was that self-destructive? You parents are amazing in what you do. We've all had to go through stuff. The man neatly lays out the facts, and he probably told his story 1,000,000 times, and so far no one was able to help him. Again, he is not supple at this point. He's just saying it just from memory, like he said it to every person he's wanted to have help him. And today this man brought his tortured son to Jesus. But Jesus wasn't there. He was coming down from the mountain with his 3 buddies. So the guy waited because he knew Jesus was supposed to come back that day, the next day, something. He even tried to get the other 9 apostles to minister to his boy. And they were unsuccessful at something they had succeeded with many times in the past. And we're going to learn why. I've already been telling you why, but we'll see it. Verse 19, Jesus. Oh, faithless generation, how long must I be among you? How long do I have to put up with you? Bring the boy to me. So Jesus is trying to find a way to teach these disciples how to maintain a higher level of thinking. But they seem to forget the lesson as fast as it was taught. And have you ever been told somebody's name, and by the time the conversation's over, you've forgotten the name? I hate it when I do that. You're calling, okay, man, we'll see you later, man. You know, dude, you know. It's crazy. Well, it's the same thing. These are powerful lessons that these guys were seeing and doing. You see, to forget is to be faithless. Like, did we read verse 19? Yeah. Oh, faithless generation. Faithless really just means to be forgetful. Because if your faith is believing, it's just a totally focused and committed thought pattern. So to be faithless means, you know, we're not keeping our mind focused. We're forgetting. And these same disciples had already healed people. They'd already cast out many spirits. They had twice helped in a miraculous feeding of people, many thousands of people. And some had even seen Peter walk on the water, and Jesus. What will it finally take to make this lesson stick? And there's something about to happen. It was random. But it really allows Jesus to drive this message home, because there wasn't all that much time left before he was going to Jerusalem and was going to be killed. In fact, he just told them he was going to die a few days before this, and they didn't believe him. They couldn't comprehend it. And he'd been saying it for months. But it's hard concept to think that the man's going to be tortured and killed. How can the lesson stick, and how can we make it practical? How can you make your lessons in life, your life victories stick? How can you make them practical for the next problem? How do they relate and interchange? We have to be supple like that and be able to figure it out. Verse 20, and they brought the boy toward Jesus, but as soon as he drew near, the Spirit took control of the boy and threw him on the ground, where he rolled, foaming at the mouth. He wasn't a pretty sight. Remember, this kid is covered with burn scars, cuts, fresh cuts, bruises, scabs. His teeth are worn down to nubs because he grinds his teeth. He grits his teeth. See, dirt's caked around his foaming mouth. He was not pretty. Jesus to the Father. How long has he been this way? I like how Jesus can just shift, you know. This kid's rolling around there in the ground like a top, you know, like a fish out of water, flapping around in the dusty dirt on the side, you know, and Jesus, how long has this guy been there? How long has this kid been that way? And he's not shaken by a new and powerful problem. You're all going to get hit with stuff that seems overwhelming. We all do. It's like I don't see a way out of this. Well, try to. Learn to. And sometimes to see a way out, you have to take the steps of going back in your mind, and I've done this, and I've done this, and I saw this, and God did this for me, and this person helped me with this, and you talk yourself into victory again. Remember to remember. You know, and to know how long it's going on will tell us how deeply it's rooted. How thick are the calluses on the heart. You know, it's no different for us. You know, our deeply rooted problems, the thing we've been having trouble overcoming, are harder. Face it. You know, but they're not impossible to surmount even if we've allowed it to go on for years and years and years. Some people have had problems since they were children. It's hard. So hard to overcome some of that stuff. But is it impossible? No. And here's the steps how to do this. See, a hard heart is a heart that's not ready for change. It only wants to do it a certain way. It's used to rubbing on the same thoughts And then it gets used to that. And so, but we don't want to be that way. We don't want to be that person. So here we go. The father. Here's how long. Since he was a baby, the Spirit has thrown him often into the fire and sometimes into the water, trying to destroy him. I've run out of options. I've tried everything. But if there's anything you can do, please have pity on us and help us. There's so many lessons in that verse that my head wants to explode. Here's a few. Speak up for help, no matter who's watching. Ask questions. Even Jesus did. Listen to the answer. Listen for key words in that answer that'll help you see where the callous problem lies. Give people hope. Give yourself hope. And finally, again, take action no matter who's watching. See, whatever was driving that boy, it was trying to kill him over and over and over again. And the father's last hope was Jesus. You guys realize he's still alive, don't you? He's still alive. He's still at work. He's still doing stuff. He's still doing stuff for you. What do you need? When you're on that stormy boat out there, you need him to walk up on the water towards you? Why not? You see, what would he do for you? Probably anything. So, Jesus, verse 23. Jesus said, what do you mean? If there's anything, all things are possible if you only believe. All things are possible if you only believe. See, you've probably been taught that Jesus turned that man's if around. He did. It's a good teaching. You see, and that was the key word. The dad was not taking full responsibility until that point. Sure, he had to be an amazing dad, keeping this wildly suicidal kid alive for years and years. And Jesus didn't feel sorry for him. Jesus didn't try to make him feel good. Oh, did you really mean to say it this way, sir? Jesus Jesus just laid the cards on the table. It was time for the dad to stop complaining and to fully commit to the health of his child. No more excuses. Well, they couldn't do it, and no one else had been able to do it. All these years, no one's been able to do it. If you could do something, it's not if. When I was about 2 hours into the uphill portion of the marathon, a super fit, good-looking guy with perfect gear. It was all like everything matched. His shoes, his little compressions, everything matched. And he was like in immaculate shape. He was a young man. And he runs up to me and he starts chatting me up. You don't think people do it, but they do that, on the Pikes Peak Marathon, if you're slow like me. And so after a few minutes, I asked him what his pace was, what his goal time was. And he told me, I said, you better get moving, man. Don't stay with me. Here's what my time's going to be. I pretty much knew by that point. And so he twerps off, and like it's nothing, and he takes off and goes. And I thought, well, that's it. I'll see him when he's on his way back down. Because you always see this, you're going up, then the people coming down come back down the same trail. So usually you see everybody. And so he was gone, and and oddly enough, I kept catching up to this kid. And I would find him sitting on a rock messing with his shoes, or sitting on a rock messing with his compression sleeves, or standing on a rock taking pictures of the scenery, I just kept doing this, and then he would say, I can't wait till next year's race. He told me this a few times. I can't wait till next year's race. And then I realized he's talking himself out of this race. He's making excuses. My shoes don't work right. My compression sleeves don't feel right. My shirt's chafing me. I'm just doing this for the scenery. He didn't finish. He didn't finish. He turned around and went back. And, and I thought how, no matter how good he looked, and no matter how well physically prepared he was not mentally prepared for the race. When I heard all his excuses and watched him fiddle and fidget and all this stuff, I saw guys, old men like me, run along, fall off the trail, start rolling down, getting stopped by bushes. I would stop. You okay? I think so. And they'd claw their way back up to the trail, and they'd keep running. Old farts. Oh, excuse me. I saw this one guy from Korea. We were running about the same pace. I didn't know someone could throw up that many times. I did not know that it was even in somebody that they could do that. And so I'd always say, you okay? Yes, thank you so much for asking me. And then he'd take off. It was crazy. And this one guy, he talked himself out of the race before he even hit the hard part, above timberline, 12,000 feet, and the punishing downhill. He was in far better shape than me. You see, but his words and action showed lack of conviction. And that's what all believing is conviction. He didn't see himself finishing. No matter how bad I felt, I was going to finish. So here's the father crying in desperation, tears popping out of his eyes. He says, I believe, Lord, help me to believe. Finally. And now we're talking, help me help myself. It always boils back down to that. It's up to you if you're going to change. It's not you're not society's problem. You're your own problem. I'm my own problem. If I want a better job, I better go get a better job. If I want more money, I got to figure a way to make more money. If I want a better car, I got to figure a way to get a better car. It's nobody else's fault. It's not your parents' fault. It's not your mommy's fault. It's not your brothers, your uncles, your daddies. It's not anybody's fault. If you don't have what you want right now, take it on. Take it on. And the things you can't handle, that's where God comes in. That's where God comes in. So I'm saying it's your victories and God's victories. We always think, we think that our problems are insurmountable. Maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. But they're not to God. But to us they may be. So here we go. Finish this up. Verse 25. Jesus noticed that a crowd had gathered around him. This is even a bigger crowd now. And he issued a command to the unclean spirit. Jesus, listen up, you no-talking, no-hearing demon. I myself am ordering you to come out of him now. Come out and don't ever come back. The spirit shrieked and caused the boy to thrash about. And then it came out of the boy and left him laying as still as death. And many of those in the crowd whispered that he was dead. But Jesus took the boy by the hand and lifted him up to his feet. See, Jesus noticed that the crowd was growing. He was aware. He was constantly learning. He was taking things in as he went, but he wasn't distracted from the ultimate goal of deliverance. See, disciples to Jesus. Verse 28. It says, later he and his disciples gathered privately in a house. And the disciples said to Jesus, hey, how come we couldn't cast out that unclean spirit? We've done it 1,000,000 times. What's up? Why not this time? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Where's my believing? Where's my thinking? Where's my head at? What's going on? Verse 29. Jesus said, that sort of powerful spirit can only be conquered with much prayer and fasting. And herein lies the answer to so many of life's problems. If we can understand prayer and fasting, we're going to understand how to get our deliverance. This is just summing this whole teaching up now. Prayer and fasting is nothing more than lifestyle. Simply put, it's being constantly aware. It's asking the right questions. It's remembering to remember our victories. It's applying and reapplying life's lessons. It's seeking to help others when we need help ourselves. It's looking past the problems and expecting the solution. You have to see the finish line. Until that moment, all anyone could see was a severely tormented and ugly boy. It's all the dad could see. It's all the apostles could see. And all the crowd could see. And like that woman I saw on the peak, at first she was spooky. But finally, as I talked to her, she was gorgeous. See, nobody trips over mountains. They trip over small stones. Small stones are just those things in your life that just you keep stumbling over the same things over and over and over and over again. It's time to get past that. Think of the finish line. Think of your goal. What do you really want? Can't God help you get there? Job lost everything. 10 children got killed in one day. He lost all his businesses. He would be today like Trump or something. He was like the richest man of the East at that time. And he lost it all. But he got it when he got his head back together and stopped feeling sorry for himself. Then what happened is he ended up with twice as much as he had the first time. What about you? You want twice as much? It's the same stuff. It's just remember to remember. You see, reapply the lessons that once brought you victory, and they will help you conquer your next mountainous problem. See, remember that lesson of the sunblock? But I'm going to put a little twist on it. Remember to apply enough victorious memories to cover your exposed areas before you go out. Reapply the learning while you're out. And further reapplication of your amazing successes is even more necessary during times of great stress or exertion. Folks, remember to remember. Victory's around the corner. Remember to remember. And you will begin to see things happen more and more and more in your life. God bless.